So today, what you're going to do through this assignment is I'm going to talk you through a little bit of polygenics one more time, and then I'm going to play a video. I'll provide the link. I can't play the video in this because it makes it too long. So polygenic, just several genes that affect one character. So skin color, height are examples, and we can look multiple genes. In this case, we have three genes that are going to impact in this little diagram skin color. And we can go from very light to very dark, dependent on the presence of genes and that combination of just having one or two or three or four or five or up to six in this example. Skin color is unique. 371 genes we now know impact skin color. So one term that you're going to hear, we talk genetics. Genetics is investigating a specific allele on a specific chromosome and what does that gene and the alleles on that gene do. Genomics is how do genes kind of interplay off of each other and looks at the whole system. So really when you're talking polygenics, you're really referring to the study of genomics because it is multiple genes on different chromosomes that are impacting the phenotype that you see of skin color. So you will watch this HHA-MI video. I'm going to put the link to this video, if I can get it to stop playing. I'll put the link in Google Classroom for you to watch. It's about 18 minutes. I promise it's really good. Hopefully when you watch it, you will get into hearing terms of evolution, of ecology. I'll come back to this, but you'll hear about evolution, a little bit about ecology, but selective. So there was selective pressures for specific genes as we moved. How did UV and the amount of UV and the type of UV light impact skin color? So interesting from a social justice kind of side of things, but also from figuring out, watching the scientific process of how they were able to figure this out and how a question was developed and then researched and then a new question was developed and research that went back to the original question. So it all is interconnected. It all plays off of each other. So watch this video. Again, the link will be in Google Classroom for you. Really good. So everything that you talked about in Mendel knots, so codominance, multiple alleles, and polygenics, all are what happens if the pink Mendelian chart does not work. And so we'll see these genes tend to run in families. And so a lot of times you're intermediates between your mom and dad. You have this bell curve, this continuation of different kind of scales of how that trait is expressed. Now, a different topic is called pleiotropy. And this is when you have one gene, but there are multiple phenotypic effects. So it's not lots of genes, it's one gene with multiple phenotypic effects. So you're going to see a range of expression of that gene, but it's all tied to just a single gene. So I can have dad that's a carrier and mom that's a carrier. For each one of their mating events, they have a 25% possibility of a child that does not have CF. They have the 50% possibility of having a child that does exhibit the defective gene or is a carrier of CF, and they have a 25% possibility with each mating to have a child that has cystic fibrosis. So again, one gene, but it has multiple phenotypic effects. This is cystic fibrosis is fairly common. It strikes one out of about every 2,500 people of European descent. Problems that you have if you have cystic fibrosis, a lot of sinus, nose polyps or growth in the nose. You have very salty sweat, trouble breathing, and that's going to be because of the mucus that's building up. Frequent lung infections, again, because of the mucus buildup. The heart tends to be enlarged. Abnormal pancreas function, really fatty bowel movements, trouble digesting food. If you have gallstones, that's probably indicating, think gallbladder, bile. There's issues with bile because if the bowel movements are fatty, then bile production. Bile is probably not being released to help break down or scrub those fats apart. So it's not just the lungs, although that is where the disease most often presents itself. It can impact throughout the body. So kind of a famous person that didn't have it, but his son was diagnosed with cystic fibrosis, is Boomer Esiason. If you are a Cincinnati Bengals fan, you should know that he was the quarterback back in the day. And he played in Cincinnati. He was huge in Cincinnati, obviously started a family. And his little guy that they named Gunner was diagnosed with cystic fibrosis. Now, if you have cystic fibrosis and it goes untreated, most of these children don't make it past their 5th birthday. So they're not living long enough to reproduce and pass those traits on in most cases. Gunner here as a high school senior in New York, his dad got traded to the New York Jets where he finished out his career. So Boomer grew up in New York. And then Boomer decided to go off to college like everybody wants to. He's like a lot of you in the room wanted his independence. So think about college as a freshman, but then having a breathing disorder on top of everything else. So Boomer played football, he played hockey, he's very athletic, went on his freshman year. And I'm just going to play a couple of minutes of what life is like with cystic fibrosis in college. And I'm going to skip if it'll let me.
The cystic fibrosis community is invited to participate in a series of videos and podcasts on individuals that are living, breathing, succeeding with cystic fibrosis. With the help of today's therapy,
I'm going to skip ahead till we get to where it actually is talking about him.
Boston College, majoring in English, active in intramurals, and compliant with CF.
And compliant just means he follows his
living in a dorm is definitely something that every single American should have to go through.
Living with Gunner isn't different than living with anyone else, really. You just have to be careful to be a little bit cleaner, keep everything, nice and neat.
My roommates they all know what I'm dealing with. They're all very supportive of me. They all get along, and if someone does ever get sick or something like that, we can deal with it. I feel like everywhere in the dorm we have Clorox cleanup or Lysol spray.
Gunner told me early on last year, and I actually knew about it. I had a friend who had a cousin who had it, so I knew about the illness beforehand.
Usually I try to keep it as simple as possible when I'm telling someone. I try to just say, I've got a respiratory disease. It's called cystic fibrosis, and I really just kind of leave it at that. And, it's actually surprised me how many people do know about it or have a connection to the disease. But there are people who have no idea what it is, and, they'll just accept it and they're like, oh, okay, cool.
Living with Gunner, I definitely have a better understanding of, what a CF patient goes through on a daily basis, or whether it be the treatments or just, everything that comes with being a CF patient.
Doing your nebulizer in front of new people, I think that's a very important fear that we all have to get over. I'll just sit there and start doing it, and I kind of look at it like, you're living with me, you got to deal with it, because I'm dealing with it every day.
He does them twice a day, so it's become pretty much regular in the room.
I will be playing video games, he'll be doing his treatments, you don't even notice. We're just all become so accustomed to it that it doesn't even faze us.
Then living with me makes me feel like I have a little bit more normal of a experience where I'm living with 3 people this year. It's not just me living in the single, isolated from everyone else.
We do everything together. We go out, we play real sports together. We, go have lunch together, we make dinner together.
We do like to actually have sit-down dinners. The 4 of us will all cook dinner, pitch in, and then we'll all sit down around the table and eat dinner, and then we'll clean up after.
You can't tell at all that he has cystic fibrosis. The only time, you're really reminded is when he starts coughing or if he's doing his treatments. But otherwise, you'll be playing flag football with him or hockey with him. You can't tell anything's wrong with him.
There's a lot of free time in college, and intramurals are a great way to fill that free time. It definitely beats going to the gym because you're doing an activity with other people, and it's competitive. It's a lot of fun. It reminds me of playing sports in high school. It's a good way to keep the lungs moving, and that's the way we stay in shape. One of the most important things that I found when I got to school last year was finding a routine that worked for me in terms of.
that's going to be important for all my seniors out there. Find a routine that works for you. And I just want to show, I didn't talk over him, but I want to show this little piece. If you look right here in this screen, let's see if I can close that off. He's got this vest thing on, and you can't really see it in the video, but that is a great biomedical engineering fix here. And so what it does is you put it on and it essentially shakes and it vibrates. And so it breaks up the really thick mucus in the lungs so that it can be expelled. And then the breathing treatment is also going to help kind of loosen everything up so that it can be expelled out. And that's one of the primary side effects of cystic fibrosis. So you saw all of those different things that can happen to a person that has CF. But the coughing and the mucus is definitely for most a characteristic that you see quite a bit. So all my little biomedical engineers, that's kind of a cool feat.
The cystic fibrosis.
That you may want to kind of check out and see. So here we can see that vest. He's doing an nebulizer. So that has medicine that he's breathing in. It's typically, I think most of the time, a warm air. You can see his vials of his medicine that he would put in. He went on to graduate from Boston College. There he was the quarterback for his high school team, and he coaches. At one point, he needed feeding tubes. So that's him giving himself a treatment. So cystic fibrosis, like I said, this young lady is getting patted on the back. It's just a way you have to do airway clearance techniques because the mucus is so thick and sticky, it's hard to breathe. And so they'll do different techniques. So patting on the back, the vest makes you more independent because you're not relying on someone else to smack your back to improve your lung function. So what they're doing for CF therapies is the cystic fibrosis transmembrane conductance regulators. So here's a membrane protein. Here is a transmembrane protein. And so what's happening, these therapies are starting to correct the function of the defective protein. This is the defective protein made by the CF gene. So because different mutations cause different defects in the protein, so again, it's one allele, but it has all these different expressions because there's different mutations of the defect in the protein. The protein has lots of different shapes, not one wrong shape. The medications that have been developed so far are very specific to a specific mutation. So let me say that a different way. One gene can have this issue, but that one gene can have multiple impacts on the shape of a protein. And because there's multiple impacts, you would need multiple different medicines to be able to cause that, to fix kind of that shape deregulation. And so the therapies that they have developed work, but they only work for small people that have specific mutations that correlate. So what can they do if you have cystic fibrosis? One of the big things they can do is a lung transplant. So you can see they would just go in and detach. Here's the heart, and then pulmonary arteries and left atrial attachment. They will detach, and then they will bring in a new lung. So here's this actually happening. If you don't want to watch, look away from your screen. But it's pretty extensive, and you have to be committed to definite lifestyle changes. So that's it for our video. We're going to talk polydactylism and what happens when you get extra digits after we do our blood type lab on Monday.